So hello and welcome to the video. Today I'm going to continue my attempt to answer the question of which Star Alliance frequent flyer scheme is the best one to join. The first part of this series is linked here, and I would strongly recommend you watch that before watching this video. This video still may not make much sense, but it will make more sense if you've watched that video first. That video contains some general background to Star Alliance and its schemes, and talked about how to get status on Star Alliance via a status match. This video will talk about earning status from scratch as well as retaining status. I'll also talk about some of the differences between the schemes, and at the end of this video I will reveal which scheme I have picked and explain why. So if that sounds interesting, or you'd like to see how a middle-aged bald guy like me can make such a cripplingly dull topic sound interesting, then stick around. Hi, I'm Matt. Over the last 25 years I've travelled a lot. I've lived in 5 countries on 4 continents. I've flown over 1.3 million miles. I've visited over 100 countries, every American state, but I'm nowhere near done. So subscribe to the channel so you can come with me. So first up, let me repeat the disclaimer I made at the start of the first video. This is a complex and dynamic subject, and things may have changed since I made this video or since I sourced the information I included in this video. It's not impossible that I may have made errors too. So apologies in advance if anything is now different. I'll pin a comment to this video in which I'll include any changes that I become aware of. So if you have to, or choose to, earn Star Alliance status from scratch, the qualification level for each scheme then becomes relevant and can vary widely. Plus, how you earn miles for qualification can vary quite widely too. So as a fairly simple illustration of this, if you started from scratch, you'd need 40,000 miles to get to gold with Turkish, you'd need 60,000 miles with Egypt Air, and you need a whopping 100,000 miles with Lufthansa and its partners. Quite a wide range, as you can see. I've assembled this data into a couple of tables that I'll put up on my website if you want to study it in a bit more detail. I'll put a link to that in the description below. There are a couple of schemes that are mentioned favourably in dispatches. The first is Aegean, where you only need 36,000 miles and 6 Aegean flights to get to gold. Be aware that this is a 2-stage process, so you do need to navigate your way through quite carefully to get there. You'd need 72,000 miles to achieve gold without any Aegean flights. Aegean, though, is one of the more generous when it comes to earning miles, and to renew gold you only need 12,000 miles provided you've accumulated 4 flights on Aegean. You'd need 24,000 miles with no flights on Aegean, which is pretty low. The other favoured option is, or I should actually say was, Asiana from Korea. Gold with them only required 40,000 miles, and renewal could be achieved at 30,000 miles. But there's no requirement to travel on Asiana, and they give you a 2-year window for achieving both of those things. So in effect you'd only need 20,000 miles a year to get gold, and then 15,000 miles a year to retain it. Asiana also had a good reputation for redemptions, but, and it's a big but, Asiana is in the process of being taken over by Korean Air, which is a member of SkyTeam. So it is very likely that Asiana's tenure in Star Alliance is limited. Which is a bit of a shame, because it's probably the scheme that I would have picked all else being equal, but given this uncertainty it really unfortunately is now a non-starter. So, assuming you don't or can't match across, who do you pick? I did some sums. I have 3 trips in mind for the next year or so, all of which are best done on Star Alliance airlines. That would be 11 business class flights on 5 different Star Alliance airlines, all at prices that I consider to be actually pretty reasonable. So I used a website called Where to Credit to determine what miles each of those flights would earn in 15 different Star Alliance schemes. I skipped Air China and Shenzhen Airlines because there's relatively little information available on them in English. I also skipped the United and Avianca schemes because they're a combination of miles flown and price paid, which makes them a little trickier to compare. And I also skipped Air New Zealand because that's the scheme I'm leaving, and a little oddly Where to Credit gave 0 as the miles earned on virtually all of those flights, which means I'd have had to look them all up individually. There were a couple of other quirks in the data provided by Where to Credit, so if you come across something that looks a bit odd, double check the result with the airline directly. So the worst scheme on that basis would be the Miles and More scheme shared by Lufthansa and 5 other European airlines, which would only get you 37% of the way to gold. They actually had the 5th highest mileage earning result out of those flights, but that 100,000 mile criteria for gold is penal. I will mention here that those airlines frequently offer a discounted business class fare which goes under a P flying code. That code earns relatively well in the Miles and More scheme, and with Air Canada, ANA, SAS, Singapore and Thai Air, but it will earn you exactly 0 in every other Star Alliance scheme. If you are likely to travel frequently, or perhaps even at all, on one of those discounted business class fares, your choice of scheme may be heavily influenced by this. Similarly, discounted Singapore airline fares often don't qualify for earning miles in other programs. So I think the point here is that if you know an upcoming route, or there is a route that you regularly fly, look at the miles that that flight will earn you via wheretocredit.com. It won't tell you the scheme to join, but it may well tell you which schemes you shouldn't join. So back to the analysis. The next worst was South African, then EVA, and Singapore and Thai tied, then Aegean. As predicted, Aegean was actually the 2nd highest mileage earner out of all of the airlines, but the 72,000 miles required for gold if you don't fly at all with Aegean is the reason why they fared so badly here. Remember though that if you do get to gold with Aegean, requalifying is the easiest out of all of the schemes. 9th was ANA, then came TAP. They actually had the highest mileage earning out of any of the airlines, but that 70,000 miles required for gold if you don't match across was the problem. Then came Egypt Air, Asiana, Air Canada and Air India, which brings us to the top 3. In 3 was SAS. Number 2 was Ethiopian, bit of a surprise there. But number 1 was Turkish, where those 11 flights would get you 87% of the way to gold. They were only the 14th highest of the 15 schemes in terms of miles earned, but that 40,000 qualifying threshold was their salvation. And remember, their scheme works on a 2-year cycle, so you'd get that gold for 2 years compared to the 1 from other schemes. Indeed, getting 40,000 miles from scratch with Turkish might actually be easier than the gyrations that you have to go through to secure gold after matching across. So if all of that isn't worth a click of the like button, then I really don't know what is. But I think this proves that just by looking at the numbers in any of these schemes in isolation, you can draw very wrong conclusions. So, on to renewals, and I am going to speed things up a little bit here. Generally, schemes require 70 to 100% of the original qualifying miles for requalification. It's actually a bit tricky to find that number in certain schemes. So whatever worked for you in the original qualification will probably work for you again when it comes to requalification. The only significant difference being that Turkish and Asiana have a 2-year renewal cycle. And remember that Aegean has the lowest requalification threshold, particularly if you actually travel with Aegean. Look out for offers too. From the first video you'll recall that once you've achieved a TAP status match, you only need 25,000 miles and 4 TAP flights to requalify, which is a 50% discount on the normal requirement. Probably something to do with the ongoing shenanigans, but keep an eye open for those sorts of opportunities. The third criteria for picking a scheme is how good they are when it comes to spending miles. Once again, this is really complicated. Imagine all the data that's gone into getting us this far, and you have as much again, if not more, to analyse the redemption side of this. It is even more complicated because some airlines will allow redemptions on other airlines that aren't even in Star Alliance. ANA, for example, will allow redemptions on Etihad, Garuda and Virgin, plus 9 other airlines that aren't even in the Star Alliance. How this works is that airlines make inventory available through a Star Alliance clearinghouse. So all member airlines should see and present the same information to their frequent flyers, unless an airline decides to tinker with what it shows, which can happen. So generally, and there is a big exception coming up in 2 paragraphs' time, there's no redemption advantage between the schemes when it comes to seeing availability. So that's not really a criteria for selecting one scheme over another. But of course redemptions are priced differently from scheme to scheme, and the rate at which you earn miles also differs. So it's difficult to produce a single redemption analysis table like the one you've just seen. I should also note that schemes' points will often also expire, typically after 3 years, and that will happen regardless of activity. Some schemes, like Air Canada and Avianca, will take your points if you've had no activity in their scheme for 12 months. The best approach is to assume they'll expire after 3 years, do something in your account every year to ensure that you retain them, and be pleasantly surprised if they live for longer than 3 years. As promised, one final point on redemptions. Some airlines, notably Lufthansa, Swiss and Singapore, hold back their first-class inventory and only make it available to their own frequent flyers. They will then offer anything that's left through that clearinghouse 14 days before departure. For this reason, the esteemed Rob from Head for Points maintains accounts with Lufthansa and Singapore specifically to access those redemptions. Also significant to Rob is that the Lufthansa Miles and More scheme is the only one that offers a points earning credit card in the UK, through which you can harvest points from your day-to-day spending. For me, I don't worry too much about the redemption side of my decision because I know I will get good value out of any redemptions I make regardless of the scheme that I join. All schemes will have sweet spots, but they will all also have areas where they're not so competitive. But if your ambition is to gather points and then spend them on Etihad's first class products, then joining a scheme like ANA's where that form of redemption is allowed would impact on your decision. My advice would be to narrow your choice to a few and then do some Googling to see if there is anything on the redemption side that would act as a deal breaker for you. I could say a lot more. I could talk about how Egypt Air allows the head of a family to gather all of the points of family members travelling with them, which can be extremely lucrative. I could also talk about how certain airlines, including Turkish, have status levels above gold, which can bring some really valuable rewards, such as upgrade vouchers. But I do need to wrap things up and talk about which scheme I actually picked. I would probably have gone for Asiana had they not been facing such uncertainty over whether they would remain in the Star Alliance programme. But I have to exclude them, which has brought my shortlist down to 4. First is TAP, almost exclusively because of that gold match they are currently offering. The renewal after the first 12 months is achievable, but the stumbling block would be that 50,000 mile renewal that would be required thereafter. Second on the list would be Turkish, because of the gold match, but also because of the 2-year cycles and the relatively low requalification thresholds. Their scheme has the reputation of not being the most user-friendly though. As we saw, this scheme is actually competitive even without getting in via a status match. Third on the list is Aegean. Despite there being no current status match, they do offer low thresholds, high earnings potential, and have a reputation for having good value redemptions. It would be no great hardship to have to spend a weekend on a Greek island every year either. And finally, SAS makes the shortlist because they are the best scheme that offers you miles for those pesky P-class business fares offered by the Lufthansa Group. The 45,000 mile requalification threshold is the obvious drawback, although there are worse out there. So I eliminated SAS, although I will almost certainly now end up flying almost exclusively on those P-class fares on Lufthansa for the next 12 months. That higher qualification and requalification threshold just didn't justify picking them. I'll also, with regret, eliminate TAP. It's good to start off with, but that medium-term requalification is likely to be a problem. So it's down to Turkish and Aegean, and I'm going to go for Aegean. It's a close run thing, but Aegean scores very highly in just about every criteria that is significant, except of course for not offering a match. I'll certainly ask them if they will, and I'll let you know what happens. As the majority of my upcoming travel is likely to be in business class, not having gold in hand until I have qualified through Aegean is unlikely to be much of a problem. It has crossed my mind to match across to TAP as well, so I do have gold in hand for those trips plus any others in economy that I do take. I do feel I need to read the small print first before doing so, because although I know that is technically allowed, it is a little bit frowned upon and it is a little bit sneaky. So there you go, how to choose a Star Alliance frequent flyer program and which one I have picked. This has been hands down the hardest video to script. It's been a bit of a pain to record, and I'm really not looking forward to having to edit 26 airline logos onto a world map. But I hope it has been useful. Please let me know if it has in the comments. Feedback here would be very helpful for me. Please give this video a sympathy like if you haven't already, and if you are new, please subscribe. If you've made it this far through all of this, I'm certain you will enjoy the other stuff that I have on my channel. So thanks for watching. I'll see you all again soon. Goodbye.